Hello everyone, welcome to First Chapter Friday, and today is our special Halloween edition. Our story will be one of the scariest ones I feel that we have in our school library, and that is The DeVouring, and it's by Simon Holt. The tagline is, "Your body is here, but not your soul." Prologue. On sorry night, just a few days before Christmas, you have to snuff the lamps, douse the flames in the fireplace, and spend the night in the cold and dark. If you don't, the Devourers will get you. They're the monsters you can't see, the ones that crave the heat and light, the ones that feed on your fear, then swallow you whole. I should know. When I was a child, I saw it happen, and I've lived with that fear ever since. That night, Jeremiah and I came in the back door just after sunset, chased by a cold December wind. Pa stood at the window with his back to us, clenching his mug and gazing out into the snowy night. I knew we were in trouble when I saw the whiskey bottle on the kitchen table. "You remember to bring them cows in?" Pa was a giant in thick boots and faded overalls. I shivered as he turned to face us. His eyes were empty and cold like the winter fields outside, and just as dead. He got like that when he drank. I think that was after Ma died. Some part of him did too. I saw the color run right out of Jeremiah's cheeks. "Oh, I forgot, Pa." He smiled at me, but I knew he was afraid. It was my fault. I'd begged for a piggyback ride before the sun went down, and before the chores were done. That was why he'd forgotten to put the cows in the barn. "You got straw for brains?" "No, Pa." "I think maybe you do. I think we'd best find a job a boy with straw for brains can do." Pa slammed his mug down so hard that the whiskey splashed out of it. He dragged Jeremiah out of the door by the arm, grabbing a rope and lantern from the hook outside as they headed for the cornfield. I followed, running and slipping on icy mud in the dark. Pa strode up to the old scarecrow that loomed on its cross over the field. With one yank he ripped it from its nails. Then he tore off the head and threw the body to the ground. Pa looked like some kind of fairy book monster. Holding up that burlap head in his giant fist, he threw it at Jeremiah's feet. "See there, straws for brains, just like you. Now get up on that post, boy. You're gonna do yourself some scarecrowing." Jeremiah's breath came in sharp bursts of steam. But Pa, there ain't no corn. It's the winter." "No corn? No crows. It'll be an easy job then, won't it?" Pa thrust Jeremiah up against the post. Then he snatched one of my brother's wrists and lashed it to the crossbeam with the rope. Tears streaked down Jeremiah's face as Pa tied down one, then the other. I cried for my brother too, even though he was 10 years old, 4 years older than me. He was still scared of the dark. He said he could feel monsters in the night waiting in the shadows to come in and get him. He called them the Devourers, evil things that come for children on the longest, darkest night of the year. Pa lit the lantern and put it down beside the post. Pa, please." My brother's voice shuddered, and his body shook. "Not tonight. Any night but tonight." "How long does Jeremiah have to stay out here?" I asked. "Till it's done." And then my father made me leave my brother tied in the freezing black air. I looked back over my shoulder at Jeremiah. His coat had fallen open by his throat, and the St. Giles medal he always wore gleamed in the lantern light. I silently prayed for St. Giles to protect Jeremiah's soul from the Devourers. Pa sent me to bed, but I wouldn't sleep, and after a while I sneaked back into the kitchen. Pa was passed out, face down on the table, the empty whiskey bottle turned on its side. I threw on my coat over my nightgown, pulled up my big boots, and I ran to the cornfield. The lantern cast a flickering circle of light at Jeremiah's feet. It reflected on his St. Giles medal, which shone like a heart on fire at the center of the dark cross. I dashed up to him and threw my arms around his neck, my tears wetting his frozen skin. His teeth chattered behind his lips, and ice frosted his eyelashes. "It's coming. I'm here," I said, struggling to untie the knots around his wrist, but the rope was so tight and my fingers were numb. "Can you see it? The shadow, moving, coming for me." I looked around, but all I could see was the flickering lantern and the black shapes of the barn and the house and the endless fields of white. The wind moaned. "It's just me, Jeremiah. I'll get you down," I pleaded with him, but he kept screaming, "Get it away!" Suddenly the lantern flared up, white hot, and the glass shattered. I cried out and covered my head as kerosene splattered over the snow, flames snapping up the air around us. The headless scarecrow on the ground caught fire and crackled as it burned. A billowing pillar of smoke rose up like a giant black snake, coiling around my brother up on the cross. God forgive me, I ran. I ran as fast as I could, the cold burning in my lungs, Jeremiah's screams burning in my ears. I didn't save him. I didn't bring him back. This isn't how the horror ended for us. This is how it began. As I ran, the screaming suddenly stopped, and I heard something much worse. It was Jeremiah's voice, but different, lower, resonating across the field like a demon's olden chant. "When dark creeps in and eats the light, bury your fears on sorry night, for in the winter's blackest hours comes the feasting of the Devourers. No one can see it, the life they stole. Your body's here, but not your soul." Chapter 1. Since Mum had left them without so much as a goodbye kiss almost a year ago, taking only a packed suitcase and a photo album, Reggie had been forced to assume a number of extra duties around the house. With school, friends, and a job to worry about, a large portion of those duties, laundry, vacuuming, dishes, went undone for extended periods until Dad cracked the whip. Bedtime, story duty, however, was never overlooked. But she had quickly grown tired of the usual kiddie fare and had decided to introduce Henry to some juicier stuff. And to Reggie, juicier meant scary. "You said you weren't going to get scared." The lump beside her shuddered. "Did the Devourers really get Jeremiah?" he whispered. "Of course not. It's just a story, Henry." "But tomorrow's December 22nd, Reggie. Tomorrow is sorry night." Reggie pulled the covers down to reveal a wide-eyed 8-year-old boy with wild curls clutching a stuffed koala bear. "I knew you wouldn't be able to handle it." She tried to stand up, but he clutched her arm. "Go to sleep, Hen." "Wait!" Henry scrunched his skinny body up against her. "Don't leave." He reminded Reggie of a newborn in Animal Planet documentaries, burrowing into its mother for warmth. The two of them had been close, even with the 7-year age gap, but things were different now. Now he reached for her hand more often, leaned against her on the couch watching TV, and wandered into her room after dinner with nothing more to say than hi. He wasn't growing up. He was reverting to a small, frightened child, and his clinginess was suffocating her. Henry reached out a hand and traced his fingers across the book's cracked brown leather cover. It was an old journal that Reggie had found in one of the shipping boxes she had unpacked at her part-time job at the used bookstore. The DeVouring had been splayed across the first page in slanting, spidery handwriting, like a title page to a novel. Intrigued, she had slid it into her backpack. When she was done reading it, she would just stick it in with the next shipment. No harm done. Reggie discovered the book contained a bizarre, handwritten narrative of monsters called the Devourers that could take over people's bodies and minds when they were most frightened. But according to the author, they could only do this one night a year, on Sorry Night, the night of the winter solstice. Reggie wondered if this was an author's first draft of the novel, but an online search turned up nothing to suggest a book called The Devouring had ever been published. The journal was dense. Shaky handwriting and rambling narratives made some selections painfully hard to read. Creepy sketches and symbols adorned its yellowing pages at odd intervals, but Reggie could find no method to the author's madness. Part ghost story, part Kabbalistic research, and part frenzied ravings. The book both captivated and disturbed her. "I don't like being scared, Reg. I thought maybe—" Reggie stroked her brother's warm cheek and offered him a tired smile. "Then no more scary stories, okay?" Henry nodded. In his cage across the room, General Squeak, Henry's hamster, ran around and around in his plastic wheel. "Why do you like being scared, Reg?" Henry yawned. "No more questions. If you're still awake when Dad gets home, we'll both have something to be scared about." "Please, just an answer this one." Reggie considered the question. "Well, I guess the short answer is it's good practice." "Practice for what?" "For when you're really scared." "Being scared is practice for being scared?" Henry's eyes closed. He was starting to drift off. "I don't get it." "Think of it this way," Reggie said. "If you don't learn how to be scared, you'll never really learn how to be brave." She swung her feet off the bed, and Henry grabbed her arm again. "Stay till I fall asleep. Don't leave me alone." Reggie sighed, and she sat back on the bed. General Squeak finished his marathon, and soon the only sound was Henry's breathing. She kissed her sleeping brother on the forehead. "You're not alone, Henry," she said softly. "I'm here." So for today, our very special Halloween edition, I'm going to read you Chapter 2, because that's really what sets up this whole story. Chapter 2. Sometime during the night, 4 inches of fresh snow fell on the small town in Cutter's Wedge. Walking to school, Henry couldn't get enough of it. Running through it, jumping in it, kicking at it, He'd pestered Dad for rides out to the slopes to snowboard every weekend and would keep it up until spring. Reggie and her best friend Aaron Cole watched him race around like a puppy off a leash. Aaron wore a fedora tilted at a jaunty angle, but his hat was the least of his eccentricities. His love of B-grade horror films, his encyclopedic knowledge of serial killers, and his preoccupation with government conspiracies all pushed him beyond geeky and into the realm of the truly strange. "Henry!" Reggie hollered. "You'll get soaked and you'll freeze your butt off in class." Aaron rolled his eyes. "Could you possibly be a bigger bummer?" Reggie frowned. "Did I really say that?" Aaron summoned his best Schlockmeister impression. "Coming soon, the new novel from horror master Stephen King, Regina, the blood-curdling tale of a small-town teen who wakes up one morning to discover she has become her brother's mother." A snowball splattered against Aaron's hat, sending it flying off his head. "Bullseye, you're dead, punk!" Henry crowed, standing 20 feet away, molding another snowball. Aaron picked up his hat and dusted the snow off. "Au contraire, you messed with my hat, which means you're dead." He handed the hat to Reggie and took off for Henry, who turned tail and ran. Graceful was never a word Reggie would use to describe Aaron. His long legs always seemed to be trying to catch up to each other, and his arms did more flapping than pumping. Aaron's brain was a finely tuned machine, and its only real issue was coordinating with his body. Still, he had no trouble catching 8-year-old Henry. He swept him up from behind, and they both tumbled into the snow, laughing and wrestling. Reggie came and stood over them. "Don't hurt him," she said. "I won't." I was talking to Henry. Henry let loose a flurry of kung fu chops and battle cries, and Aaron covered his head in mock fright. "I give! I give!" "Don't mess with the best!" Henry hopped to his feet, triumphant. He ran toward the red brick elementary school and joined the stream of kids pouring in. As Aaron got to his feet, Reggie brushed the snow off him and handed him back his hat. He put it back on, and the two of them headed across the street to Cutter High. The quad was crammed with sleepy teenagers in their usual state of semi-android techno-consciousness, leaning on the walls and squatting on the stairs. They were isolated by headphones, entranced by cell phones, tapping on laptops, and mutely communing with the Wi-Fi spirit world. The 4-story stone relic of a school loomed over it all. Reggie always expected to see an Igor incarnation peering down from her from the rooftop, a squawking raven perched on his shoulder. Reggie and Aaron were neither popular nor unpopular. They were part of the group Aaron liked to call the pay-nodders, those whose social standing meant that if they did make random eye contact with someone in the hall, they'd probably get a nod back and maybe even a quick hey. They both had their share of friends, kids that they could hang with at their lockers or in the lunchroom. But the exchanges were mostly teenage business as usual. Music, TV, movie critiques, where who bought what, and news flashes about hookups and broken hearts. As Aaron and Reggie climbed the stairs to head into school, the Kaisner twins stepped from the crowd and blocked the doors. The two wore hooded sweatshirts under black field jackets, filthy jeans, and steel-toed boots. They looked like thugs with shaved heads and broad chests. Keach rarely spoke, Mitch never did, and neither seemed interested in anything other than destruction. The Kaisners had been sent from Boston to live with their mother after getting into some trouble with the law. Both had to report to a probation officer once a month and weren't supposed to be out after 10 o'clock, but nobody knew exactly what they'd done. What they did know was that since the twins' arrival at Cutter High, 4 students' cars had been broken into, the gym equipment shed had been burned to the ground, and the biology lab's collection of fetal pigs had mysteriously appeared in the cafeteria line as the afternoon's featured lunch. But the Kaisner's size and aggression, while daunting to most of the student body, was a boon to the football coach, who immediately recruited them to play right and left tackle. This status seemed to give them permission to pick on anybody they wanted to, and they did. Aaron was a favorite target. Ever since he had made a sarcastic comment about the twins' Cro-Magnon looks in world history, and the word got back to them, Keach grabbed the fedora off Aaron's head. "You think this makes you look tough, Cole? Like a gangster?" And Aaron just looked at the ground. "Taking someone's hat, really? Is that it?" Reggie glared at them and stepped forward. "You'd think with such a fat head, you'd have more brains in there." The twins intimidated the hell out of her, but she'd never let them know that. Keach held the hat out to Reggie. She grabbed at it, but he pulled it away again and crammed it on his own bald head. "How's it look?" he said to his brother. Mitch just stared Reggie down. "Yeah, a little small for my fat head." Keach pulled a pocket knife out of his coat and flicked it open. He cut slits in either side of the hat and then stuck it back on his head. "Perfect," he said, as the first period bell rang. The quad sea of body started flowing toward the school's entrance. Keach flipped the knife shut and stuck it back in his pocket, then turned with Mitch and headed into the school. "Thanks for trying," Aaron said as he and Reggie shuffled off to class. "God, I need to grow a pair." "They're just a-holes, Aaron. Don't let them get to you." As they made their way through the crowds, a voice rang out from behind them. "Keach!" The brute jock turned around. Reggie looked over her shoulder to see Quinn Waiters, a junior as much renowned for his athletic prowess as his dimples, making his way toward them in a confident strut and easy smile. Tall and lean, with dark curls, he was the best quarterback in Cutter High history, and an upperclassman god in a rugby shirt. "Hat!" he called from down the corridor. Keach stared at him for a moment before the hat came sailing over the crowd. Quinn caught it with one hand and gave it back to Aaron, frowning at the cuts in the sides. "Sorry about that, man. I'd kill them myself if they didn't keep me so damn snug in the pocket." "Football speech, Reg," Aaron said. "A pocket is—" Reggie punched Aaron's arm. "I know what a pocket is." Quinn grinned at her. Aaron looked at Reggie, who seemed to be under some sort of Quinn trance, staring at him, with her mouth slightly open. He leaned toward her as he dug around in his backpack. "This is business," he whispered. "Try not to drool." Like I'd even have a chance with him, she thought. Quinn was an A-list guy, and he went out with A-list girls. It wasn't just that she thought of herself as some sort of cow or freak, but she just wasn't much of anybody. If Cutter High were a movie, Reggie Holloway would be an extra. She wore T-shirts or plain solid-colored sweaters, jeans and sneakers, or army surplus boots. Reggie considered her best feature to be her long dark hair, the color of rich chocolate. But because she had to make family breakfast and take care of Henry every morning, she never had time to style it. More often than not, it was tied back into a long frizzy ponytail. Makeup usually was at a minimum, too. Her eyes were dark and shining, though. Aaron thought they were vampish. She guessed that was a pretty high compliment coming from him, but doubted that Quinn had good taste. Aaron had dug a manila folder from his book bag. He glanced around furtively as Quinn handed him a $50 bill in exchange for the folder. Quinn eyed the pristine 5-page paper inside. Hamlet's Dilemma. Good for a B+? Yup. Sweet. Aaron had started the business 2 years ago. At first it had been tricky, finding the right voice to write papers that read like something a guy like Quinn could hand in, only a little better. At this point, he found that keeping his steady clientele to 6 or 7 worked best. It brought in some steady cash and raised his social standing a notch. Reggie considered it unethical, immoral, and illegal. Aaron agreed and looked at it as valuable preparation for the real world. Aaron pocketed his fee and started to leave. Quinn looked up. Wait a sec. Tell me what... Sorry, 3 more deliveries. Aaron winked at Reggie. Any questions, ask my protege. Aaron disappeared into the crowd, leaving the 2 of them standing together. As people passed by, it seemed as if every other student said, Hey, Quinn, or What up, Q? Reggie wondered what it was like to have to say hello back to 100 people a day. Quinn studied Reggie for a moment before saying, Holloway, right? Reggie was stunned. He knew her name? Uh-huh, she said. Freshman? Quinn asked. I think you're in my study hall. Uh-huh, Reggie said again, successfully executing another nod. She was in his study hall, but she hadn't thought his field of vision extended to the table in the back where she sat. Quinn had turned his attention back to the paper. He flipped through it and frowned. Reggie didn't think she had ever seen him without his faint, cool smile. They were almost alone now in the hallway. Somehow it made her a little braver. Something wrong? She asked. Quinn looked up. Huh? He said. Reggie's mouth felt dry. This is ridiculous, she thought. She wasn't one of those girls who went all gaga just because a cute boy talked to her. You just look a little... I don't know, she stammered. Dear God, he probably thought she was mentally challenged. You just look like something's wrong. Quinn's pale green eyes studied her. He unwrapped a stick of gum, popped it in his mouth, and chewed nervously. I got English first period right now, and... You didn't read the play? Quinn shrugged and smiled at her. But it was different from his perfect smile. It was wistful and a little crooked. Right then, Reggie realized she was a witness to a historic event. Quinn Waiters was human and perfect, uncertain even. It was almost as if she were seeing a stage actor slip out of character for a second. Don't get the wrong impression, okay? I'm not a dumb jock. I can write term papers just fine. I started the play. I dug the whole father's ghost thing, but then I got slammed. His closeness made Reggie's pulse quicken. He smelled really good. Teachers love to pour it on before break. Some sort of code, she said, slumping melodramatically under the weight of her satchel. The shoulder strap ripped, and Reggie's books and binders spilled all over the floor. Damn it! Her face reddened, and she wished she could climb into her emptied bag and hide there. Just when she had started speaking like a functioning person, too. She knelt on the ground and began shoving the books back into her bag. Quinn bent down to help her and picked up the journal before she could stop him. What's the devouring? He asked, examining it curiously. Huh? Oh, that. Just some monster story, written like a journal. I collect. She was nerding out and couldn't stop. I'm a horror fan, and I collect stuff like that. Scary stories and stuff. I know, I'm such a total geek. Quinn helped Reggie to her feet. No, not at all. That's cool, very. He handed the journal back to her. Cool, very? She raised an eyebrow at him. You got me. You're a geek. Quinn laughed and he ran his fingers through his hair. But not a total geek. Total geeks aren't usually cute. He stopped abruptly, as if he couldn't believe he had just said that out loud. Reggie felt her cheeks burn. So, Hamlet, she said. Yeah, right, Hamlet. The nutshell. He knows his uncle killed his father and waffles about whether or not he should take revenge. Does he? Take revenge? Yeah, but he's too late. He poisons his uncle, but then he dies, right? Everybody dies in Shakespeare. Sweet. Quinn glanced around the empty hall. Late for class. Gotta go turn in my paper. Hey, thanks for the help. Reggie stared at him like a puppy dog. You're welcome. Quinn walked a few steps, but then looked back at her to say, See you in study hall. I'll save you a seat. She nodded, not entirely believing what had just happened. So, I apologize. It appears that the meat of the story, which is when the Devouring Day happens, is later in the story. So, do you want to stick around for another chapter? All right, well, apparently it happens in chapter 3. Do you want me to read this one? You can go get a snack. All right, why don't you do that? You get a snack, come right back, and you can finish hearing the scary beginning of this story. I want to hook you. So, chapter 3. The wind, like a stranger demanding entry, rattled the window shutters of Reggie's bedroom. She lay on top of her bed's quilt, absently flipping through the old Vault of Horror comic and Aaron sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, reading aloud from The Devouring. They lurked in the cold and dark, hungry and wicked. They wait for their one chance to devour the weak on sorry night. Then the devourers feast on a banquet of fear, your fear. They steal your soul, but your body remains. No one knows the difference. He looked up at Reggie. Whoever wrote this journal was clearly insane. You love that stuff. She tossed the comic book aside. Oh yeah, hell yeah, Aaron laughed. Ever since you let me borrow it, I just can't get it out of my head. Are you sure we're still going to give the Devourers a call tonight? Bloody Mary style? If you brought the supplies, sure, she grinned. We have to terrify ourselves. That's how they got Jeremiah. So if I get devoured, will you come save me? Not a chance. Reggie took the lighter from her pocket and then lit 3 black candles on her nightstand. She switched off the bedside lamp. You ready to face your fear? God, we're such uber geeks, Aaron said. Shadows cast in the flickering candlelight cavorted across the wall behind him. First night of vacation. Other kids party, but we... Hey, what's with the candles? Henry stood in the doorway, scratching his pajama-clad butt. Reggie frowned. You're supposed to be sleeping. He yawned before saying, Not tired. What are you guys doing anyway? Henry stood up and pointed to the doorway. Go back to bed. Beyond the window, a gust of wind howled. The shutters rattled in reply. Henry winced. The blizzard's keeping me awake. I should just stay in here. Nice try, said Reggie. Bed, now. But Dad's gone tonight. Who cares? When Dad said he was going to be out of town overnight, bidding on contracts, she knew that it wouldn't mean more freedom. It would mean less. Most kids would see it as a chance to have a house party, but for Reggie it meant an unpaid babysitting gig. She stood up, looming over her brother. Go. Henry hung his head. Fine, he said. Night, Henry, said Aaron. Night. Come on, I'll tuck you back in. They walked back to his room, and Henry squealed when Reggie snatched him up and flipped him onto his bed. He wriggled under the covers. "What are you and Aaron gonna do?" "None of your business," she said as she walked toward the door. "Wait, what if I have nightmares?" "Is this still about the Vowers? Henry, they're not real." "But tonight's sorry night." Regina sat down on the bed. "Listen, if you get scared, close your eyes and think of something really good. A good time you had, or a favorite place, or somebody you love. You'll be asleep before you know it, and it's 100% nightmare-proof, okay?" "Okay." Henry kissed his sister on the cheek and lay back, pulling the covers up to his chin. "Night, Reg." "Good night and sweet dreams." When Reggie walked back to her room, it felt colder. Aaron looked ghoulish in the candlelight. His face seemed waxy, and the shadows filled his eye sockets. Her heart quickened when he pulled a jar from the backpack just beside him. A dark shape crawled about inside of it. "Is he okay?" Aaron asked. "Henry, he's fine. He's just a little spooked by the story." "Well, me too." He lifted the jar to her as if proposing a toast. "Ready?" "No, but this is the only night to do it." Reggie closed her eyes, gritted her teeth, and stuck out her hand. The jar slid, scraped as Aaron unscrewed it. "So do it." Something prickly stepped onto her palm. It moved slowly at first, exploring the hollows of her knuckles as it wandered up her fingers. Pointy legs skirted over her thumb. Reggie flinched. "Open your eyes," said Aaron. "Face your fear." Reggie peeked. The face of her fear was a wolf spider with a swollen body and bristling legs. It was nearly the width of her wrist. "Oh, God!" Reggie cringed. As if the spider could feel her fear, it scuttled up her arm in a matter of seconds. "Time!" she demanded. 45 to go," said Aaron, glancing at the stopwatch in his hand. 40. Reggie clenched her eyes shut. She felt the spider crawl up her neck and into her hair, the gorged abdomen dragging across her scalp. Now the crown of her head, then down onto her forehead. Her stomach lurched and her skin crawled, as if both were trying to squirm away from her body. Its legs brushed past her brows and stopped on the tip of her nose. She wanted to scream, but her throat constricted. All that came out was a weak rattle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, done, shouted Aaron. "Get it off! Get it off!" Reggie shrieked, swiping the spider off her nose. It landed on the rug and scrambled off into a corner before Aaron could grab it. Reggie jumped around her room and brushed at her face, still feeling its tiny legs on her cheek. "Great, now that thing's on the loose in my room," she muttered, once she had calmed down a bit. "You'll probably have baby spiders in your sock drawer," said Aaron brightly. "So, are you a Vower?" "I don't think so," Reggie shivered. "But then again, if I were a Vower, how would you know?" "This is true." Aaron poked Reggie's forehead. "What'd you do with my loser friend, you Vower? Still hungry, must eat more fear." Reggie grabbed Aaron's wrist and dragged him down the stairs to the back porch, her laughter drowning in the howling wind. Squeak, squeak, squeak. General Squeak ran around and around in his metal wheel. Sometimes he would skitter about all night, making all sorts of little noises, but Henry liked knowing he had a friend with him in the dark, especially tonight. Outside, the blizzard raged, gusts of falling snow swirling against the window panes like ghosts, seeking escape from the cold. The house quaked beneath their wails. Henry pulled the blanket over his head and covered his ears. Why hadn't he told Reggie to close the blinds? "Think of something good," she said. She said to think of something good. Henry closed his eyes and he tried to imagine all the things he liked about winter. His snowboard, his hot chocolate, Christmas presents, Reggie taking him sledding. Reggie! Why couldn't he hear her through the vent connecting their rooms? Another wail, louder this time, closer. Henry poked his head out from under the covers. His panicked gaze darted about the room. The blue glow of his penguin nightlight, usually so comforting, had the opposite effect tonight. Everything looked submerged, crystallized, frozen. Even Cappy the koala, his favorite stuffed animal, had a sinister air. The bear's deformed shadow, a long inhuman shape, lunging across the floor, seemed to be cast by some other malevolent thing. Henry remembered the story of Jeremiah, how he was left alone on Sorry Night, terrified in the dark, with the glow of a single lantern at his feet. The Devourer had come to him like a moth to the flame. The nightlight flickered. When dark creeps in and eats the light, his breath came faster. Another icy gale howled outside, and the wall shivered around him. The nightlight flared briefly, and then, with a sharp, buzzing crackle, it died. Winter night swallowed the room. Henry trembled, alone in the dark. He crawled out of bed and felt his way to the door. "Reggie!" he called out. He opened his door, then crept down the hallway, feeling along the walls. Henry hurried to Reggie's door and pushed it open. 3 black candles burned on the nightstand. Their flames were pinpricks of light in an empty room. "Reggie! Aaron?" No one answered. The window shutters banged and rattled, and a frigid draught snuffed out the candle's meager light. He ran back to his own bedroom, and he threw himself into his bed, burying himself in blankets. He choked on his breath. "Reggie! Aaron! They were gone!" Bury your fears on Sorry Night. He wanted his mother, but she was gone too. Think of something good, Reggie had said. A good time you had, or a favorite place, or someone you love. Henry squeezed his eyes shut, and he tried to remember the day his family went to the carnival. He thought of cotton candy sweetness dissolving on his tongue, of waving to his parents from the carousel, of winning Cappy the koala from the water gun game, of his mother's dark hair shining in the July sunlight. "Why did you leave us?" he whispered. Tears nestled in the corners of his lips. "Come back, Mommy, please come back." Only the weeping wind answered his pleas, flooding him with fear, chilling his thoughts, and coagulating into something black and dead, until something alive and hungry pulled him toward sleep. The snow continued to swirl against the window, but the mournful gusts came less frequently now. The storm was passing. The soft melody of a carnival calliope played in the distance, for in the winter's darkest hours. The doorknob turned. The bedroom door opened just enough to let in a slant of the dull orange hall light, and a cool draught carried with it the aroma of buttered popcorn and powdered sugar. Henry pulled the covers tightly around him. "Reggie?" There was no answer. All was still. Then a figure stood in the doorway. Her long brown curls, wide blue eyes, and gleaming white smile all seemed so real and wonderfully alive. Come the feasting of the Devourers. "Mommy?" Soundlessly, she crossed the wood floor and sat in her familiar spot on his bed. Her thin, elegant arm reached for the lamp on his nightstand, and the metal chain chinked against the ceramic post. Henry gazed at his mother's beautiful face in the lamplight. She was here. He wiped his tear-filled eyes. "Mommy, is it really you?" "It's me, sweet boy. You called to me, and I've come." The voice was hers, the face was hers, the hair and the smile and the smell were hers. It was her. Henry clutched his mother fiercely, burying his face in her breast. But the deeper he pressed into her, the more he shivered. No one can see it, the life they stole. "You're cold, Mommy," Henry sobbed, digging into her clothes, trying to feel the warmth of her body. "You're so cold." "I am, sweetheart, very cold, but I'll be warm again soon." She coiled her arms around Henry's quivering body. The bulb in the lamp faded as a cold wind sighed through the room. Frost spider-webbed across the window, jagged ice cuts interlacing over blackness. "Am I dreaming, Mom?" He flailed in the wintry darkness, grasping for heat and some small promise of love. "I don't want to be dreaming. I'm so scared." "I know, but I'm here with you, Henry. I'll always be here." Her ivory skin rippled like water, and inky tendrils of cold black smoke oozed from her nostrils and her mouth. "There's nothing to be afraid of. Your body's here, but not your soul." Henry closed his eyes and let the darkness in. Reggie dragged the cover off the hot tub on her back deck as Aaron watched. The newly fallen snow's weight made it a more laborious task than usual, but at last it tumbled aside. A billowing cloud of steam rolled from the water's surface and swirled around them. The tub's water heater still worked, but the bubble jets had failed months ago. It was one of the many things Reggie's dad hadn't been able to fix since her mother had left. In the darkness, the water in the tub seemed black. The whole thing looked like a giant cauldron. The snowstorm was mostly over, but the air remained sharp and dry. The hot tub's steam did nothing to lessen the chill. Overhead, a starless sky closed in the world like a tomb. "It's freezing out here, Aaron. You sure you want to do this?" "I'm not chickening out." He already felt ridiculous wearing nothing but rubber flip-flops, Hawaiian print swim trunks, and a thick terry cloth robe of Reggie's. Even though his shivering had little to do with the cold, he wouldn't back down. "Okay, then. Ready?" Aaron nodded. He kicked off the flip-flops and shrugged off the robe, hoping the night masked not only his pale body, but also his surging terror. If Reggie had let a huge spider crawl on her for 1 minute, he could stay underwater for just as long. He climbed onto the edge of the tub, plunged in his feet. Its bath water temperature was much warmer than the air, but goose flesh crawled across his skin nonetheless. The wet seeped up Aaron's swim trunks as he lowered himself in. Reggie took out the stopwatch. "You can do it," she said. She held the watch up. "Ready, and go." Aaron took a deep breath, and he sank into the water. As it enveloped him, he heard his heart pound in his ears. The memory of his 7th birthday came surging back. He had been wading in Knoll Lake, searching for crawdads, and had lost his footing on an algae-covered stone at the edge of a steep descent. In a moment, he had slipped into deeper water. As he thrashed about, he caught his foot between rocks on the lake's floor. Aaron remembered the panic, water filling his mouth and his nostrils. He opened his eyes and looked up. Where was Reggie? He couldn't see her. The water was crushing him, seeping in through his ears, his lips, his nose. His lungs burned and his body convulsed. The roar of submersion pounded in his head, and he felt himself spinning. Soon he would involuntarily gasp for air and find none. There was no up or down. There was only a black water, and it was deeper than the ocean, darker than the grave. It was stronger than him. It would come rushing in. It would flood his lungs, pressing on him from the inside until he burst. Panicked and helpless, Aaron opened his mouth and a slug of water filled his throat. He gagged and convulsed in a desperate attempt to draw a breath, but already his body was drowning, bloating, and dying to the horrific death his mind had played out so many times in his mind. His fear froze him, and he sank to the bottom paralyzed. Abruptly, his body ripped upward and burst through the surface. He flailed and splashed with his eyes rolled back and his head still suffocating. "Aaron!" Reggie dragged him from the tub, and Aaron dropped to his knees, vomiting a jet of water and bile onto the ground. "Breathe!" He coughed and he spat, hunched up in a ball, shaking more from terror than cold. Reggie knelt beside him and patted his back. "Are you okay?" Reggie asked. Aaron did not answer. He stood weakly, his body trembling. Reggie wrapped the rope around him and led him back inside. He sat down heavily on a kitchen chair. Reggie hurried through the darkened house to the living room and returned with a blanket. When she flicked the kitchen light switch, nothing happened. "Shoot! The storm knocked out the electricity," she said, and she set the blanket on Aaron's lap. "Talk to me." "I'll live." He wrapped the blanket around himself. "But I'm never going to be a deep-sea diver, no matter what they tell me on career day." Reggie dug a flashlight from one of the kitchen drawers while Aaron went to put on dry clothes. When he came back, his backpack was slung over his shoulder and color had returned to his face. "So, did I make it?" he asked. Reggie avoided his eyes. "That's not really important." "Oh, come on, how long?" "So I didn't make a full minute. 55 seconds? 50? Aaron, For crying out loud, Reg!" Aaron grabbed the stopwatch from her before she could stop him and peered at the numbers on the display. 19 seconds. 19 seconds? "That's it?" Aaron cried. "That's pathetic." "Well, at least you're not a vower." "No, still just pussy boy Aaron." "Aaron, it's not a big deal. It's just a stupid game." "I need to go." Reggie didn't want to make it worse for him. "Okay, well, just call me tomorrow." "Sure." Aaron strode out the front door, and it banged shut behind him. As soon as he was gone, Reggie clicked on the flashlight and headed upstairs. The hallway was much colder than downstairs, and as she passed Henry's room, she felt a cold draft underneath his door. Squeak, squeak, squeak went the hamster wheel inside. She opened the door and approached Henry's bed. He slept peacefully. "He's got to be freezing," Reggie said to herself, and pulled a wool blanket from the foot of his bed. She shivered and looked around. It felt like someone else was in the room. A sweep of the flashlight's beam illuminated little toy race cars scattered on the floor and snowboarder posters tacked to the walls. Cappy the koala stared blankly from his perch on the toy box. On the nightstand sat the picture of the family of the Bottle Hill Fairgrounds. Reggie picked it up. It was one of the last photos taken of the four of them before Mom had left. Now it was just she, Henry, and General Squeak. She put the picture back and flashed the light across the window. The glass was cracked. Jagged, silvery lines spread across it like a spider web. "Everything's falling apart around here," she muttered. Reggie glanced at Henry once more before she headed down the dark hallway, shivering. So it turns out the vows go to those who are the most scared. It wasn't Aaron that was most scared, and it wasn't Reggie. It was Henry. So we know that the next chapter begins, and Henry's no longer Henry anymore. Henry has become a vower. I hope you join me next week for First Chapter Friday. Thank you for staying for this extended period.